Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Masters of Data. I'm Adam White. I have with me David Girvin. Hello, David.
Hey, how's it going?
Good to see you.
Good to see you
I know
too. I
you're.
actually spent my morning going through your closet so I could twin with you today.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad. I should
Nobody
just.
knows though that Adam's like 6'3" or 6'4" and I'm short.
I'm
So
not. I'm not that tall. That's for sure.
I had
I'm
to
just
roll
tall
my
enough to
shoulders.
still be moderately comfortable on airplanes,
There you
um,
go.
which is helpful as much
Yeah.
time as I've spent on them. Well, David, good to see you. I know you're highly caffeinated. You've been trying new things with an espresso machine, which is always fun. Which is great for our topic today because it's a high energy topic of Claude, ChatGPT, LiteLLM, compliance apps. Like we've been doing some interesting work allowed by these companies in the AI space who have put out some nice APIs and some documentation on this front. And just kind of talking through like what are these things? What's the need for these compliance apps? How do we use them? And so it should be a fun conversation on that front.
Yeah, everybody's been busy. There's been
Yes,
there's
that's
been a
right.
lot of stuff coming out, so it's probably good to explain it to everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Maybe I'll just start with like so three of the big apps that we just released, two of them are compliance APIs, and one of them is kind of the same thing, but for a different company. So the first one is LiteLLM. They're a huge API or LLM router company, right? So a lot of enterprises are using this where you bring all the different models into LiteLLM, and then it kind of like decides who can look at what, and it tracks everything. It's kind of an observability tool too.
Yep.
Um, so we came out with an app for that. So it gives you all those different, data points for that. And then we came out with a compliance app for ChatGPT as our OpenAI, as well as one for Claude. And that was cool because we got to be part of their like big kickoff thing with a few other companies. We were
Yeah.
first to get it, which was
Bunch of
fun.
dashboards, some detection rules, lots of cool stuff there.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's called a compliance app, but it's a little more broad than that. I'd almost call it like an IT director app. Because
Yeah.
it's like when you're doing IT and you don't have like a full security team yet, you have to do everything, right? You have some compliance, you have some like people stuff, and then you have a little security, and that's kind of what that app seems like.
Yeah. Even with the dashboards there, I mean, you have everything from like the spend side, like what do we do, token burn and um like what queries are being used all the way to like an identity security dashboard, of like what identities are most used and those kinds of things. It's a really broad tool set that was created, but you can again go deep in kind of any of those areas.
Yeah, it's got all the nice like spending token stuff, and then it has things that you would need to show controls for compliance in it.
Yeah.
So it has like file downloads, but and like that kind of stuff. I don't know all of them off the top of
Yeah.
my head, but it also has like you know, um, just stuff that you need for like normal everyday work. Who has access to this? Who's our biggest user here? Not
Right.
necessarily for token spend, but like who's actually getting into this tool the most? Do we see a return on investment in that? Is there like, something there? It also shows like some access management stuff in there.
Hmm.
It's got a lot of interesting stuff. I actually really
Yeah.
liked the like blocked geo map. That was one. It was like who's using Claude in a country you're not allowed to use Claude in? I was like, oh, okay, that's a pretty good check.
Yeah, like the embargo side.
Yeah,
Yeah, super
yeah.
super interesting for sure. And just yeah, that whole kind of visibility in general. Well, I think this really hits at it's certainly a conversation that we were having a lot more kind of early on in AI, which is like the fear that AI was just going to be this like black hole to IT. And I think we've seen that tackled in a variety of ways where less now AI is just this kind of shadow IT that users are using. Like there's like
Yeah.
sanctioned, be it we're a Google shop, so we use Gemini, or we've rolled out, Claude for, enterprise or whatever the case may be. Like businesses are saying, okay, the only way that we can get a handle on this is to actually sanction it, to deliver it to our employees in a way that we feel safe and secure about it. And I think these compliance apps, kind of sitting on top of that or reinforcing that visibility that businesses have is just like, kind of allaying all or helping to suppress those fears that IT orgs have on the impact of the business.
Yeah, it's just that thing where we've talked about this in security so much, which is like if you become the office of no, people are just gonna go behind your back and do whatever they want. It was so much worse with LLMs though, because it's not just using a tool off to the side that might be expanded to attack surface. You're sending data back and forth to like 15 different countries, whatever you use these kind of things.
Yeah.
So we've
In
talked a lot
in
about
in the
data
public
sovereignty.
domain also, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah.
It's like, what are you sending out there? What data is getting trained on, all those kind of things. So I feel like with some of the tools out, like these API apps, and then some of the other just like observability functions, on the LLM side, we've gotten to a lot better place. Like you can actually really see um, usage and even like some of the stuff you're putting into it. There's all kinds of tools out there now to filter and like check for PII and those kind of things, which is great. We still have a huge black hole for agents.
Mhm.
It's getting better with MCP because you can track every single call. If you have something in place to do that, you have to have something down there. But in the beginning, it was really bad because everybody's just using API and you can't see it. That's a black hole. There's nothing there. You can see that I started the call, I ended the call type of thing.
Yeah.
MCP is kind of helping us along, but it's interesting because it's going fast. This kind of observability took a long time in security for normal tools. And I feel like people, in a good way, like panic built. They were like, oh crap, we have to solve this problem, which is
Yeah, well
good.
there's a lot of a lot of pressure is probably not the right word, but in businesses, right? I mean, there's a general push to like let's obviously the goal is let's maximize the productivity of our workforce with AI, and so it's something where the technology is so readily available, that IT has almost been on the back foot of like this thing is out there and it's accessible to our employees and they can get it and use it. And maybe it's having good impacts to the business from a productivity standpoint, but it might be having negative impacts to the business from a security standpoint. And so, how do we reconcile those things and work to kind of like get back ahead of something that we are behind, right now, right? It's like a weird
Totally.
position to be in for businesses.
Yeah. Well, and it's just like, everybody that's running businesses doesn't necessarily have the time to try to keep up on the latest AI tech, right?
Yeah,
I mean, we've mentioned the VP of AI a couple of times on these podcasts. It's like that's a real thing now. People are hiring for
sure.
that, either implementation or security or adoption or, just, overall strategy for ROI. And it's a
But
really
that
fast-moving
person
space.
or that group, like they really have to wear all of those hats. It's
All
like
of
an
them.
enablement role, it's a security role,
Mhm.
it's a strategy role, and you can't like not have any of those legs of the stool. You have to do them all.
Yeah, you have to do them all, and then you have to be able to bridge build cross company. I
Yeah.
think like I dealt with that in the AppSec world because you'd have to deal with all these different people and different teams and stuff. And I feel like whoever's doing that role right now is doing a lot of like high-fiving. Like, hey, are we friends? Can I
Yeah.
come into your org and like dictate things and try to get security put in things and
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah. Let's be friends for
Let's
sure.
be friends.
So we've talked about it a little bit, but these compliance apps are like a really good first stab at just getting something available to businesses so they can, help quantify some of this stuff. We've talked about it ad nauseum probably on the podcast and certainly off the podcast of like there's this really interesting dynamic right now of, token burn and like token burn almost if you listen to just like the wind, it's like that's the goal, is just burn as many tokens as possible. It's like that sounds good, but how, because you're doing something for sure, but how do you quantify like the ROI of that if you are, you know, saying I want to turn one person into three people or one person into four people? How do you do that and hopefully not spend four persons worth of salary on tokens? There's this whole kind of like
Yeah.
formula out there that I think these compliance apps are like a stab in kind of getting to the place where we can help quantify some of this stuff. But it'll be interesting to see how it evolves for sure.
Yeah, I think it's like the easiest first step you can do. Like
Yeah,
obviously if you're a Sumo customer and you have enterprise OpenAI or enterprise Claude, like just go click the the app and add it, right? Like is
yeah,
it's our LiteLLM. It's just a super fast install. And then you can kind of I feel like looking at those kind of dashboards, it'll help you start saying like, okay, well, what else do I want to look at? You know what I
right.
mean? If it's a new space for so many people. In the token burn thing, like I follow this stuff obviously pretty pretty closely.
Closely.
And you
Yeah.
saw a few of these companies, I think Meta was one of them, where they were talking about evaluating employees on token burn. And I was just immediately like, that's so stupid because now you're just having people make slop, right? You just
Yeah.
like they just like I'm gonna spin up 75 sub agents and just go do this thing, as
Right.
opposed to like, at least the way that we've kind of approached things is like, okay, what do you do? What are your hangups? Like, what do you spend most of your time on? Can we build an automated, workflow
Yeah.
that that fixes that so you don't have to do it? Or maybe a deterministic one. Maybe we could write some code and cover it so we don't have to burn so many tokens.
Yeah.
But it's like, I think it all comes back down to enablement though. Because if you turn a whole bunch of devs loose with with Claude Code, but they don't know anything about how agents build or how they read code or any of those things, you're just going to get a ton of token burn and a bunch of bad code.
Yeah.
But if you understand how they code, you understand what their security is and all those, you could, set up OpenSpec and start building documentation and building specs around each project and doing this kind of things. Now you start getting efficient with your token burn, you start building like a really good product. So I still think, just like everything, it comes to like, are you using the tool correctly or are you just,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
going nuts?
Yeah, on the dev side, like that's an interesting thing because it's kind of like the question should be asked if all of a sudden you had 20,000 developers at your disposal, what would you have them do? How would you have them do it? You couldn't just say, all right, all 20,000 just go do whatever you want and bring
Yeah.
me back end results. It's like that's
Yeah.
chaos. That's terrible. No one could manage that. But if you
Yeah.
say, I want you to do this very specific thing and I want you to follow best practices of development and make sure you're checking in your code properly and that it's getting QA'd and, like whatever good looks like, you really kind of have to do the same thing, even though they're agents and not people. You have to treat it the same way.
Well, it's interesting because I've talked to a lot of devs just talking at conferences and stuff, and I get like two kind of reactions. One is like, these things are stupid. They don't build good code. I've been coding for 25 years. I'm not going to use. And then you get the other one, which is like, these things fill my gaps in, and I'm so much
Yeah,
more productive and I'm crushing.
augmentation is
But there's
like,
also
yeah,
like there's kind of like two different people there. There's like the maybe the individual contributor, and not saying that ICs wouldn't just adapt this. Maybe they just don't want to. Some will adapt it and be the best in the world because they're already such deep technical experts. But then there's the other, they're kind of like personality wise is maybe they were gonna go towards engineering manager. They like the orchestration side of things and like I mean, that is kind of the reality is like now you're babysitting a bunch of agents that are working on projects as teams and
yep,
it's but it's still where we're at. Like no matter what, you still have to be a good dev because QA is still the biggest part of all of this. Like quality and assurance checks after you built the code is still the choke point and what slows people down. I mean, my coding partner, I have to have him look over my PRs because you'll get deep enough where you're like, I know I'm probably missing something here. The agent built it, even though it's to my spec and everything. Like I need someone else's fresh eyes on this because I don't feel like I can QA it. And that's like a tricky space to be in, especially maybe if you have kind of a bigger ego or something like that. I know I suck, so I just I don't have a problem with it.
Well, some of the things, we've talked a little bit about a few of these before, but I thought it would be interesting to talk about just some of the things that have been in the news that highlight the need for a lot of this, and not to pick on any of these companies, like it's um, things like this are instructive for everyone else, though, like that as we're all going through the same thing here. Uber was an example of, they burned through 2026's entire AI budget in a few months, due to some of what we were just talking about, like uncontrolled agentic coding, and just tool adoption across like 5,000 engineers,
Yeah.
and maybe they were doing a lot of things right. I mean, you would assume in a company like Uber that there was structure and it wasn't just like a free for all, but it's also just, across that scale, yeah, you're going to burn a lot of tokens, you just are.
Well, it's funny because, Uber's like, they're known for having good engineering and being kind of ahead of the curve. And so I don't feel like they just went out and blew it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like you obviously kind of dominate your space. Like, there's only kind of Uber and Lyft, and like Uber's the big one in the house, right? And how much code do you actually need to write?
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Are we burning to again, are we burning tokens for ROI? Like, has anybody sat down and said, do we really need to get this product out 3 months earlier? What's the adoption rate on it? What's our ROI on like getting this control out? Do we need to spend $10 million in tokens to do that? And it's
Yeah.
the other thing is like not to like fall into the lazy side of the camp, and like I don't necessarily think it's lazy, but it's like, well, what if you can do the exact same work at a high quality rate, and you just don't actually have to work quite as much, but you're the same. I know that doesn't always happen with way companies work and everything, but man, when they've talked about the 4-day work week, I don't think I've ever seen a better path for a dev to it with
Yeah.
than the way that's working. Because then you're not burning as many tokens, you're still producing really good product, and you're not going as hard.
I guess the thing, like on the Uber example, how much code do you need to write? Like, AI might get blamed, for what is really just like, we're I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing, just like this chase for innovation. If you're a company who's trying to get into a new market or an adjacency or something like that, and so you could see this as kind of, maybe this is a quick path to get us into an entirely new, revenue space, and therefore maybe it's worth the token burn to chase that because it's money that we aren't making right now. I think that's probably a lot. Like, it's easy to just look at what we know a company does and say, man, they're what are they trying to do in that space? But like a lot of this, I think, is just like, it's not that we've gotten drunk on AI, like we've gotten drunk on innovation and trying to, find a new way to pop the share price, which
Yeah.
is that's the world we live in, So, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just it's an interesting, like, byproduct of AI, is kind of that chase of innovation.
Yeah, I think there's some hard philosophical things that's like underlying in all of that. It's
That
like,
just took us down a weird philosophical path, probably,
well,
but
I mean, like, think about this. I'm in Florida. I used to work blue collar work, so I'm pretty well ingrained in that world. I had my own, fabrication company, and I was a ship captain. And
mhm.
now the PE bros down here, like guys who have never touched a tool in their life, are buying up all the mom and pop AC companies and then rolling them
Yeah.
into uh, a bigger company because they can get a 10x evaluation instead of 3x when they get to a certain revenue, and then
Yep.
selling it off. And it's like, man, that puts a lot of people out of work and it makes everything really expensive. It's like, do we really need to make the extra $30 million off of this? Or like, are we in a good spot? Do you need the eighth Lamborghini? And I'm a capitalist, so like I'm not saying one way's the way to go or whatever, but
Well,
it's
why
something to
stop
think
at
about.
seven, David?
I
Honestly.
know. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I mean that's how I am with kids. Why stop at five? I want to be
That's
broke
true.
forever. Like maybe
Right.
I need to start rolling up
That's
AC
a
companies.
good way to do it. Yeah. But
Yeah.
no, I think yeah, just the innovation curve that it puts you on is such an interesting thing with AI. You know, one kind of constant topic out there, this is another thing that just kind of in looking at this information, like Microsoft, the AI technology cost reportedly now exceeded employee cost, like kind of a a little bit of a poster child for runaway AI spend. But again, these compliance apps, even in their infancy now, are trying to help us with good data like what we what provide in Sumo Logic. Giving businesses a way of looking at these things before they either overspend their budget or get out over their skis from like an AI cost to kind of person productivity ratio, whatever that looks like. Again, it all goes back to like even if there have been things that like didn't make sense in the AI world or we couldn't wrap our heads around why they're happening. Some of it is just like not having good data thus far, and we're getting there, and these compliance apps are again kind of a first stab at trying to make that more illuminate that better.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, going in Sumo and making some alerts on like individual token burn or something like that's a pretty easy way to start. Because I think
Yeah,
you're gonna have to separate a few things. Like, obviously, some of these companies like Microsoft just blew out the budget super hard now after they've all like laid everybody off. They're quietly hiring everybody back because it's cheaper to have a junior dev than it is to have someone, hammering 80 agents a day.
you hear that more and more, that
Yeah.
again, I think there's like, in technology we overcorrect and then, come back onto the road, all the time. It's just part of
It,
it.
I think it's why we're all so schizophrenic now from it. You keep like every time you open LinkedIn, it's like 10,000 layoffs, 8,000
R
layoffs, and then don't ever
Resilient is
think.
another word,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking about me. I'm all over the
Yeah.
place.
Right.
But yeah, I think we're gonna see some higher backs. I think
Yeah.
there's gonna be outliers. Like, one of my buddies who's a dev, probably the best guy I've ever seen with agentic development. And but he eats and breathes it and loves it. And his token burn rate is high, but it's nothing like what these other guys are talking about that I hear when they're like blowing out their budgets. So I think you're gonna maybe hiring is going to be looking for some different roles. You're going to look for like, you know, kind of certain people that are going to be agentically enhanced.
Mhm.
Let's just stick with developers right now, but like you're going to have some people who can write really good code and they might need some help doing their ticketing or doing some PR checks or refactoring. And then you're going to have or rebasing. It's really good at rebasing. Or you'll have some like junior devs who are coming up, but you want them to get up going faster and they'll be using agents. I feel like there's going to be another tier of like this kind of senior principal level dev who's just insane at using AI, and they might have a different budget.
Yeah.
And you might give them 10x more tokens than you give all your other devs, but you're gonna have to figure out a way to track all that, right? So that's I think
Right.
where we're gonna start with these compliant apps, and you're gonna start seeing things more on an individual level, because like everything in business, it's like everybody's different, everybody has different qualities to give and different things to bring to the table. So you got to figure out how to enhance the qualities that are beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's, we were talking a little bit earlier about just kind of like what are some meaningful ways of implementing AI inside of organizations. Like you are doing a lot of work right now. We're doing a lot of work with internal teams on like what does a good AI strategy look like? And then obviously, these we're excited about these compliance apps too because it will help us quantify, some of this work that we're doing. But like, starting with some just kind of low-hanging fruit stuff, you mentioned it earlier of, what are the repetitive things that you do every day? What are the like human to human handoff points, if it's like leads from a trade show or something like that, having to like be handed off between all of these different groups. Like, how can we, streamline some of those things, just as an example? There are lots of low-hanging fruit examples, but like I think that those skills that we can build for employees, those are going to have like a really direct result of how productive those people are and hopefully like letting them focus the idea or the ideal state for AI a little bit is that it is augmenting human function and allowing us to do the AI is doing the things that it does best and humans are doing the things that we do best, like interacting with other humans, the kind of person to person stuff, so like it's interesting to see that play out in a team of a company, like some of the work that is being done here at Sumo, and then also like how those compliance apps will help us say, okay, here's the like day zero state. How are we tracking over time with like the impact of those things?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting problem. I think especially if you work at a company where maybe your board and upper management's trying to implement these things, but they don't necessarily know how to find ROI. Like looking at some of
Yeah.
these apps and building on top of them, like there's a lot of great dashboards there, but you need to build stuff for you.
Hmm.
And that's the wonderful thing about Sumo is you can just go ask Mobot now to build you the dashboard that you need. But
Yeah.
thinking about like if you're upper management, you need to learn how to show ROI now on AI. It's part of your job. And
Yeah.
I think it's kind of neat that we're getting away where we can almost automate learning how to do that. If you think about using the compliance apps and Mobot and all this kind of stuff is like an edification tool to get there faster. But it's the same thing as like there's going to be experimentation. You're gonna like everything. You're gonna have some like home runs, and you're gonna fail some on implementing and automating certain people's stuff. But I've been kind of the fatalist on the AI, and I will admit that I thought AGI was going to come faster. And AI is amazing at certain things. It sucks so bad at other things, which is good because we're in this like nice space where we get to be more creative. And I think critical
Yeah.
thinkers and creative people are going to actually benefit for a while in that space because, dude, I hate making documents and I hate making slides. And I've built skills that automate all that. So it's like
Yeah.
if I'm going to go into a big meeting, I know that I have everything running and I can pull everything in 30 seconds and have a custom formatted document for the people that are in that meeting that benefits them instead of spending 2 or 3 hours to make something like that.
Yeah.
That's for me from a business use case, that's where I'm like excited about it. And
Yeah,
obviously
definitely.
development, but I don't write code here. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the plugins and skills and like the shared nature of those are exciting. Again, that's one of the cool things about the, compliance apps is like you can see what of those are being used the most by users and,
yeah,
some of that like quantifying, I guess, something that struck me just now is like the most important part of any project management or anything that you're trying to kind of push through a business is the how will we know we've been successful part. It's not the doing of the thing. It's like looking for the outcome of how we know we've been successful if we do those things, and
yeah,
like I think these compliance apps are a good kind of stab at that is like, are we driving efficiency? Are we being more effective? Are we creating the outcomes that we want through AI? or are we just using AI? Because like just using AI may or may not produce, good results that move businesses forward. But like putting some metrics on like what success actually looks like and driving towards those and having some data to back it up is what is going to allow employees to show productivity, for management to roll that up to boards, and for boards to feel like, okay, we are better as a business because of AI, and we can ideally like justify the spend of AI based on that productivity that's created.
Yeah, I completely agree.
It's
I
like
think the other
bi-directional, the
thing,
responsibility there.
yeah, it's definitely like if you can prove it, then you'll probably get more budget. Anybody can go drop $1 million and burn a bunch of tokens on
Yeah.
mindless crap. But if you
Right.
can actually like make people's not only like the business improvement, but like can you make people's job more enjoyable?
Hmm.
Because if I get to do stuff like this and do our podcasts and write blogs and do office hours and the things that I like to do, and I don't have to build out spreadsheets and do
Yeah.
like executive summaries and that kind of stuff, I'm happier at work. I
Yeah.
like being on calls with my friends and chatting and stuff like that. I don't like sitting there in a Word document for 6 hours.
Yeah, but I mean, to that point, like I showed you yesterday, a spreadsheet that AI created. There was a PDF, and
Yeah.
I fed that PDF in, and it made this beautiful
Like,
spreadsheet with, if you click this, it turns green and it shows percentages and stuff like that. Like, do you know how long that would have taken me to create that 2 years ago? Even a year ago, like the
yeah,
output wouldn't have been nearly what we saw yesterday. And
I still
so.
can't use Excel.
Yeah. But I was that allowed me to do the 12 other things that were fighting for that chunk of time of my day, because that didn't take me a full day to do. I was able to do a lot of other things yesterday that would not have gotten done.
Yeah.
And so like that's the that's the exciting stuff about AI, is like, being able to, again, also, by the way, in a sanctioned way. I was using a tool sanctioned by our
Yep.
business. I wasn't throwing data into something that, lives forever on the internet that anybody can have access to. So I think those are the exciting things. It's like businesses are enabling their employees to use AI in a way that they have signed off on, and so that is enabling enhanced productivity, and fewer things are now fighting for my time, because I can throw some things to AI, and I can do the things with that time that I've gotten back, quote unquote, to do the things that AI can't do, or that
Yeah.
that only I can do, right? It's cool.
Yeah, and it's funny because they're actually coming out with more and more cool stuff to be able to do those things and have a quality of life. So like
Hmm.
remote control, I think is what it's called on Codex and Claude Cowork. And you can hook your phone to it. And if you work with AI like me, I don't usually type anything. I yell at my
Just dictate it
yeah,
in. Yeah.
but you can like kick off, a few jobs or something, especially if you have them in tickets. And you're like, hey, go do these jobs. I need these documents made. I need you to check these technical partnership, whatever. And you can go for a walk with your family,
Yeah.
and you're still there. You can still check on it. It's not, and it's like,
Yeah.
dude, I don't know. There's got to be like a horizon where we can be humans and AI is going to help us like enjoy our jobs more. And I really do think we could get there if we like
Yeah.
prioritize it a little bit.
Yeah. By the way, just in case this helps anybody else, I told you in cowork yesterday, like I was fighting with the claude.md file. Like I've got
Yeah.
it now to where I just type slash init, and it automatically loads my context. So that's that's for anyone that helps. I think Claude Code does that automatically, where it kind of like knows who you are and what you're
Yeah.
trying to do broadly, and pulls that context in at the beginning. That apparently doesn't exist with Cowork right now, but there are some
If you
kind of
start a
hacky ways to.
project,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah,
work in a project, it'll hold your context. But
yeah,
I'm going to force that down upon all of you with my heavy-handed authoritarian Claude.md context GitHub push that I'm going to do to everybody.
See,
full context.
I think that's great. Yeah. I mean, we need the, that's the powerful stuff is when like you can where AI is almost like, kind of the personal assistant thing, but like the assistant, quote unquote, knows what your remit is and who you frequently collaborate with
Yeah.
and the projects that are important to you. And so you're not, you don't have to explain context every time. It's just like, I know who you are and what you're trying to do. And this is at least close to an answer that you would write for yourself if you had infinite superpower of AI, right?
Yeah,
So,
it's getting there. I mean,
yeah,
it really is getting a lot better at it, and it's different. It's fun. I mean, I use all the platforms obviously because I kind of have to research everything, but it's fun watching like which direction each one's going in and like how still trying to figure out like which one's the most beneficial for what task and that kind of stuff.
yeah.
But yeah, it's a what oh dang it, I was gonna say Zoe's favorite ChatGPT slop catchphrase. It's an
Uh,
ever-changing
in
technical
a ever
landscape.
digital landscape. Yeah.
Digital landscape. It's an ever-changing digital landscape.
Yeah, yeah. That's what
So
we're in. Well, it's been a fun conversation, David. We could talk AI all day. It's funny because
we
like
do.
you and I are AI like power users all day long, but we're also like realists, and so it's always fun to just kind of like talk about navigating these the ever evolving digital landscape with you as we as we talk on these podcasts. So thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it. Hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you on the next episode of Masters of Data. Thanks everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye everyone.